Hey Amazon selling enthusiast, it's Eric here. And if you're tired of the inventory management struggle, I've got a game changer for you. InventoryLab.com. Inventory Lab simplifies e-commerce, inventory management, integrates seamlessly with Amazon, and even syncs effortlessly with QuickBooks for hassle-free accounting. Go to Milwaukee Mafia/IL now because your success deserves efficient inventory management. Happy selling.
You're listening to Milwaukee Mafia, your podcast dose of Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, we're back again, and we're back on our normal timeline, I think.
We are. Yes.
So what are we talking about?
Well, so just a quick note. What I'm going to be doing today, tomorrow, soon, I'm going to actually lay out a plan moving forward, and I'm going to use episode 200 as a target end date.
Oh, wow.
Not saying we are going to end at 200, but just as a sort of a test, I guess.
I guess this is the perks of not having a book to work on, huh? That you're going to get really down in the weeds with the planning of this.
I'm going to get down in the weeds. Yeah, well, since you mentioned the down in the weeds, I actually, for probably the second time ever, I went into the Patreon this week as well. Uh-huh. So I actually know how much is in there. and I realized that people can leave comments in there. I didn't even know you could do
really?
that.
Well, they should be going to your email, though.
No, they just post on top of episodes. They're like comments under the episodes.
Oh, I thought, because I know Berto always gets those, and I thought he was getting those from his email.
No, they don't go to me direct.
Oh, that's dumb.
But I saw that. But anyway, so I want to do that and then kind of divvy up, roughly by year, how many episodes. Because this is the constant thing, and I don't get complaints or anything, but this is the thing that I deal with personally, where I can't tell if we're going too slow and I'm focusing on things that people don't care about, or what kind of a pace we should be going. And I want to make it more, where we're moving at a certain pace.
Right. Instead of being stuck in one generation for 200
200
episodes and then spending 10 episodes in the next 10 years or something.
Right,
like that.
Exactly. Because today's episode, the reason I bring this all up is today's episode is sort of another, focus on an individual. I think it's a great story. I'm not saying it's not a good story. It is. But it's not like a huge story.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going slower than I have to, I would kick out more of these and focus on the bigger stuff.
Gotcha.
So, again, I haven't received complaints. This isn't in response to anything, but I would like to kind of not go down into the weeds as much if we can keep a pace that doesn't require us to do that.
But now my question for you is that episode you're holding in your hand, isn't that typically the ones that you get feedback on?
It is.
Why would you want to cut those out if you're getting positive feedback?
I know, right?
So, I mean, while I understand what you're going for, you may just not even want to do that and just leave all the stories in there.
Well, we'll see.
So
first I'm going to lay out and see
just where it's going to end.
If I were to divide it up evenly, how many episodes should each year get? That's what I want to determine. And we'll go from there. But just to get kind of an idea of whether or not I'm dragging my feet or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and nothing may change. Somebody might not notice any difference at all, but I kind of want to get like a baseline.
And isn't it really nice to know just how much content is left? You know what I mean?
I'm using episode 200 just as an arbitrary end. That's not necessary.
Right.
But that's just to kind of give an idea.
But you probably don't have a true idea of how long it could go until you do some sort of what you're talking about and can really sit down and see, okay, how many episodes do I actually have here?
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, anyway, so all that being said, Today's episode, and this is maybe normal length, maybe a little shorter, is Teddy Azarella. I'm just going to call him Teddy throughout this episode.
It's a good idea. That's not a good name to have to repeat over and over again.
I'm just going to say Teddy. And we're going to kind of focus on him. We have not mentioned him at all that I'm aware of, and he really doesn't fit into the main scheme of things. But this is sort of a point in time where, like, he popped up on the timeline. I said, well, I guess I'll throw him in there. Teddy's born in 1904 in Ohio. His parents are Paul Azarella and Angela Gennaro. Gennaro is another name that will be coming up in the future on the podcast. His father died in October 1905, which is relevant because that means he was only a year old when his dad died. Mm-hmm. So he didn't really know his dad. He was the youngest of 4 siblings. And they lived on Detroit Street in the heart of the 3rd Ward. So if we can remember all the way back to the beginning of this podcast, 120 episodes ago or whatever it is, Detroit Street in the 3rd Ward is like the core of the beginning.
Drag of it, basically.
Like he's living within a couple doors of like the big bosses here. So he's growing up right in it. Mm-hmm. His brother Joe was a boxer, a boxing trainer, and he was busted for gambling like numerous times throughout his entire life. We're not going to talk about Joe in this episode. Originally, when I put these notes together, I put them both in here, but it didn't really work because they don't spend a lot of time together. So they don't mix well as a story. Mm-hmm. And we've had enough gambling stories lately. I'm like, we can forget Joe. I'm sorry, Joe Azarella. I mean, you're interesting, but no. So, we're going to focus on Teddy. Bootlegger Joe Pesson's malt and hop shop had its window shot out by a passing automobile in March 1928. Going way back here. Pesson suspected Teddy Azarella, who had recently threatened him, but nothing came of it. November of that year, Teddy was caught in a barn distillery at Kilbourne, which is basically like the Wisconsin Dells area.
Okay.
That authorities said had $75,000 worth of booze inside.
What?
Caught with him were several other guys, and they were released on $2,000 bond each, furnished by some guys from Portage and Baraboo. None of these guys are really super important, so I'm just going to jump over that, and you can read their names on the notes online if you want. This operation was later said to be part of Juneau Sheriff Lyle Wright's massive liquor conspiracy. Lyle Wright was known as the boy sheriff because he was like in his early 20s when he became sheriff. And he was a very questionable guy. On top of the fact that as sheriff during Prohibition, he was sort of actively involved in Prohibition in his county, not just like not looking, but sort of supporting it. That's kind of notorious, but that's not the worst of it. We'll mention him a bit we'll mention him again in a bit. The money for this big illegal still came from a man named Al Diamond, whose real name was Aaron Domnitz, but he went by Al Diamond because it sounds cooler.
Did you confirm that, or is that just your assumption?
That's my assumption.
Okay.
I mean, maybe he went by it because some other reason, but I'm guessing when you got to choose between Aaron Domnitz and Al Diamond, you're going to go Al Diamond, right?
I think probably. Unless you're worried about being associated with Neil Diamond, but this is probably prior.
This is before Neil Diamond. Who doesn't want to be associated with Neil Diamond?
Well, you never know.
Maybe they don't want to be associated with Dustin Diamond. I don't know.
That's a good point, too, actually.
Yeah. Teddy pleaded guilty and his sentence was delayed until November 1929, a year after he was caught. The sentence was delayed again when Teddy agreed to be a witness at the trial of District Attorney Clinton Price, who was also allegedly in on the conspiracy. Price was acquitted in March 1930, and then on April 10th, Teddy was finally sentenced to 60 days in jail and a $300 fine. Pretty minor, really, for how big this operation was. Mm-hmm. But he had to wait over a year to find out that he got 60 days in jail.
So when you say it's minor for an offense, are you comparing that to what you've actually heard other people doing something similar to this getting fined for it? Or are you just saying like, well, that seems like a cheap fine?
I'm basing this off the fact that if they really caught them with a still that had $75,000 worth of booze, 60 days in jail and $300 in fines, like, that doesn't really seem like it's going to stop you.
No.
Like, if you get out of jail after 60 days and that hasn't broken you, you're just going to go back and do it again.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like not a lot of incentive to stop producing.
Right. like, oh, I had to pay $300, but I also made $1,000, so whatever. Yeah. He was given 2 weeks to turn himself in. Along with Teddy, the other people who were arrested, these several other guys, and Sheriff Lyle Wright were also given this 2-week stay to turn themselves in. I don't really get this. Like, I know this is a thing that we still do today where sometimes we're like, please report to jail by such and such time. It's weird to me. Like, I don't know what the point of that is. But, you know, that's how it was. Well, anyway, during this 2-week delay, Clinton Price, the suspected but acquitted district attorney, was badly wounded at his house when he was shot by an assailant. He died early the next morning at a hospital in Mouston. I don't know if that's how you say it. Mouston?
I don't know how to say it, but
okay.
I've heard of it.
All right. While undergoing surgery. Convicted Sheriff Lyle Wright, on the same jail delay as everybody else, was the top suspect. And I don't really think I go into that more because it's kind of falls outside of it. But he ends up actually getting acquitted as well. So even though he's probably the guy who shot him, Lyle Wright is not going to go to prison for murdering a district attorney. So remember back a few years ago on this story, Teddy was suspected of threatening Joe Pessin and messing with his malt shop. Well, apparently he does it again in March 1933, asking for a cut of profits from an alleged still that Pessin is running. And I will say that Joe Pessin was definitely bootlegging. Like, it's not even like an alleged still. Like, he was.
Now, you said that he ran a store that was kind of selling like the products to me.
Yeah.
So was that completely legal, or would he been operating outside the law?
No, there's nothing illegal about selling malt and hops. I mean, okay. I don't know what people are going to use that for. You know, I mean, obviously you can use for other things. I mean, you can make like delicious ice cream with malt, but like if you're selling malt and hops specifically, like I think people kind of realize what it's for. But it's not illegal.
But none of that law did just basically outlawed alcohol. It did not outlaw anything.
Yeah,
like within ingredients that go into alcohol or anything.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing illegal about that. I mean, it's
that kind of explains why it was so easy for people to make it out of their home. So.
Oh yeah.
See if they could still just buy anything they needed to make it.
The day after the threat, a bomb consisting of 5 sticks of dynamite was found on Pessin's doorstep. The fuse had burned, but the blasting cap was defective. So he got kind of lucky there. He would have had 5 sticks of dynamite going off on his porch.
Which probably is going to take you out, I would think, right?
Yeah, seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Teddy was arrested December 6, 1933 on a vagrancy charge and labeled by police as a public enemy. This is the first time I know in Milwaukee where they started using the public enemy
term.
Yeah. Like it was kind of more of a Chicago thing.
In vagrancy is where they just arrest you for looking suspicious, right?
Right. Vagrancy is like they pick you up to ask you what your job is. You don't tell them. And they're like, well, we don't know where you're getting your money, so we're going to arrest you. Which, yeah, later on, that was ruled unconstitutional. You can't arrest people for that. But it used to be a very popular way to pick guys up for no other reason if you wanted them off the street.
Right.
So he was picked up along with 2 other guys. A policeman said that they were acting suspiciously in the vicinity of a wine distributor. Now it's 33, so prohibition has just ended here.
Okay.
They were found guilty in district court in December 1933. Judge Heading sentenced them to 90 days in the Milwaukee House of Correction. So he served more time
for looking
suspicious than actually running a giant still.
So, and wait, I'm so confused. So not only can they arrest them, but they can actually try them on these charges just for looking weird?
It's an actual charge. I mean, I don't know what the actual phrasing of vagrancy was, but I mean, it's essentially...
And he went to jail for 90 days?
Yeah.
On this charge?
Yeah, I mean, it's just if you can't prove that you're gainfully employed and you're out there looking suspicious...
That is crazy.
Yeah. So here's we're going to jump back to Lyle Wright for a second. I should have thrown this in earlier because it doesn't really fit anywhere. I'm so sorry for this episode, everybody. So Lyle Wright at this point has nothing to do with Teddy anymore, but it's 1933 and he meets and solicits bank robbery from Sam DiStefano and his brother Mike of the infamous 42 gang in Chicago. Now, Sam DiStefano is pretty well known. He was known as Mad Sam. 9 men were convicted of the 1933 robbery of the New Lisbon State Bank, while 1 was never caught. About half were tied to the Chicago outfit, with Wright as the ringleader. Wright would spend most of his life in prison, not for the murder that he probably did, but for bank robbery charges. So, like I said, this has nothing really to do with Teddy, but I wanted to make sure I threw this in because we're not going to cover it anywhere else. And Lyle Wright is an interesting guy. I had somebody contact me a while back, I mean, at least a year ago, probably 2 years or more at this point, who wanted to write a book on Lyle Wright. I don't know if they still are. As far as I know, it never came out, but I hope that they do. Mm-hmm. There's some interesting stuff out there for sure. Like the State Historical Society has files from a professor who was interviewing convicts, and he divided up his interviews by their crimes. Mm-hmm. So like there's a box where all he did was interview bank robbers. Mm-hmm. So he interviews the DiStefano brothers, and it's just like some interesting stuff in there. And although, like I said, Sam DiStefano is like pretty well known, I don't think that file in that interview is well known because it's like tucked away in some college professor's box. It's not, you're not going to find it in the FBI files or anything. So it's a strange one for sure. I will say this for Mad Sam, maybe we'll do like a special Patreon on him because this guy is nuts. This guy is absolutely nuts. The FBI would come to his door, you know, to interview him or do whatever, and he would purposely answer the door with no pants on. One time he invited the FBI agent in and offered to make him coffee, and then allegedly like pissed in his coffee and served it to him. In one situation, he had to go to court, so he had some guys carry a stretcher. He laid down on the stretcher and had him carried in on the stretcher into court while he had a megaphone and would yell out things while being carried in on the stretcher. Like,
okay,
dude's goofy. I mean, how much of that is real and how much is an act, I don't know, but he was definitely earned his Mad Sam name. It definitely, because I don't think we've talked about Mad Sam. There's really no reason we would need to in the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. But I'm like, if I'm going to get an opportunity to mention him, I'm going to mention him.
Just because he's so crazy.
Because he's a crazy guy. So maybe we'll find a way to talk about him in the future. But
sounds like a good character profile for
absolutely.
our Patreon.
So, okay. I'm so sorry for this episode. It's kind of all over. Getting back. So Teddy served his 90 days in the House of Correction for vagrancy.
Which is just great.
Yeah. He gets out, and then there's a complaint that comes in from tavern operator May Yeager. Her tavern's at the corner of Highway 100 and Highway 41. And various people were taken in for questioning. She claimed to have received a phone call threatening to bomb her home unless she paid $80 in protection money. Detectives had her give the money in an envelope and then nabbed the man as he left the tavern. The man took the envelope. 2 other men were waiting outside in a car, Harry D'Angelo and Michael Albano, both who are well-known Milwaukee mob guys.
Okay.
Harry D'Angelo was primarily known as a burglar. Michael Albano, not really high profile. I think he ran a restaurant most of the time. They were not caught immediately, but the police ran the license plate and caught up with them later. Questioning them led to the arrest of still 5 more people. Teddy Azarella, Rocco Maglio, Victoria Ruskin, who was Teddy's girlfriend, Peter Balistrieri, who, it's not clarified, but I'm pretty sure this is Frank Balistrieri's brother.
Okay.
It's hard to tell because this is before he was known, so they wouldn't have said that in the paper. But given the time, it's probably who this was. Jackie Nea, who is later murdered. Nick Vicente, Frank Maniaci, John DeMore, Tom Albano, Frank Leo Sansone, who was a bookie whose nickname was Bigfoot.
Nice.
Real, not because there's a Bigfoot next to me. Real. For listeners, there's a Bigfoot sitting next to me. But his nickname really was Bigfoot or Bigfoot Hogan. Cosmo DeSalvo, Dominic Rizzo. I mean, they got
some pretty notable names.
They got a lot of people just off of this extorting. Like this one tavern being extorted led to this whole group of guys extorting taverns. So it was a huge thing. And up to this point, we didn't know that Teddy was really mixed up in the mob. Like he grew up in the neighborhood. He was Italian, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, he could have been mixed up with some bad guys, but not been in the mob. Here's the point where we can see, okay, he's definitely in that circle. Mm-hmm. They hired attorney Mario Magna to get the charges dropped, which he did get some of the charges dropped. One person was ordered to leave town within 24 hours. But basically, they all got kind of a slap on the wrist because other than the guy who collected the envelope, it was really hard to prove a whole lot of anything. Mm-hmm. Attorney Mario Magna, I believe, covered in the past. He himself is a pretty shady guy because he was involved in child sex trafficking. So
not good stuff to be involved in.
No, so he's a fun guy. When World War II came around, Teddy enlisted in the U.S. Army as a private, like you do. By this point, he had separated from his wife. As we noticed, he already had a girlfriend on top of his wife. He separated from her. They had no children. And then he kind of fades into obscurity. He comes back up on our timeline when he dies in November 1966 at age 62. In addition to what was known here, he was reported in the paper to be a small-time gambler who took bets at his home at 509 West Keith Street. The FBI speculated that some of his profits may have been sent up to mob bosses. His funeral was handled by the usual place. He was buried in Holy Cross and left behind no children but siblings Charles, Joseph, and Mary. So, yeah, I'm going through my timeline, and in the timeline I get this guy dies.
Yeah, the guy dying. So
this guy
nothing
dies.
really notable happens in our time frame with him.
No,
it's just that he passed away.
It's just that he passed away. But see, and this is why, getting back to the beginning of this is why I want to reevaluate this how I'm doing these. But it came up that on my timeline, Teddy Azarella dies, and I'm like, oh. I'm like, don't think we talked about him. So I'm like, well, I guess if I don't talk about him now when he's dead, he's not going to come up in the future. That's it. That's the last thing he's ever going to do. So that's why it got thrown on here, even though the majority of this is in the 20s and 30s.
So you said that he obviously was very associated with the mob because of all the people that through him they were able to bring down. But do we know, was he ever was he ever a mob member, would you say? Or was he just running in the circles because he was doing all of this liquor stuff?
I would say, so it's hard to know anything, but I would say that he was probably more a mob associate than a mob member. And the reason I say that is because he's clearly mixed up with these guys.
Right.
But at the same time, if he dies in 1966, that means his name should have come up as somebody for the FBI to look into, and it didn't. And granted, I mean, he's doing most of the stuff before the time that they would have. But when the FBI got really hardcore to looking into these guys in the late 50s, early 60s, they would like look for names. Like they'd be like, who do you know who's doing mob stuff? And they'd get names, and they'd open the file, and they'd do the background check on them and everything else. As far as I know, he didn't even have that.
He never even came up in that.
Yeah, so he'd get mentioned in passing, but that was about it. I don't think they ever actually ran a check on him specifically.
So more than likely, he was just really big into the bootlegging scene. And because he was big into the bootlegging scene, and he was in Milwaukee, and he was probably he was living in the Third Ward, it just kind of swept him up, and he became associated with mob members.
That's what I would say, yeah, because he definitely seems to have dropped off from being public enemy, which is, you know,
the first time they ever used the term.
Yeah, he got to be the guy. The first time they used the term public enemy, he gets to be the guy. He goes from being that to then World War II comes, and he's like, I guess I'm done.
Yeah, I'll just go enlist and then be done with this lifestyle.
Yeah.
So,
but I think definitely the guy who was working on the Lyle Wright book, I hope that he does. That's a story that I'm not going to do. I'm not. This is not one of the ones where I'm like saying I'm not going to do it, and then 5 years I'm like, oh, I'll do it. No, I'm not. But there's a lot of material out there. I mean, there's a lot of the Mad Sam stuff out there. Anytime you've got a sheriff and a district attorney involved in a murder, that's high profile, obviously. Again, lots of stuff in the state archives. I know that like even Lyle Wright had files opened on him by the governor for, I don't know what the proper term is, but basically, you know, somebody in public office not acting appropriately.
Okay.
that's not the legal term, but the governor's investigation office, you know, whatever it's called,
him to see what he could possibly have been up to, basically.
Yeah. They would look into these guys when rumors would come up, and then they'd report to the governor to see if they could kind of get these guys removed from office. So I know that he's got at least one, if not two, boxes of stuff in Madison about what they looked into, and I'm sure not all of that made the paper.
Mm-hmm.
So really would be a great story. If you wanted to see the connection between a guy in the middle of Wisconsin, you know, Wisconsin-Dells Baraboo area, his connection with Milwaukee mobsters, Chicago mobsters, politics, great story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do it, but great story. And so I hope somebody does do it.
So I don't know if I really have many questions for this one. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's
this is, like I said, it's just getting one out of here.
I would ask if we're going to hear from this character again, but obviously not, because he dies on the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so sorry, so sorry to people listening. But you know, it'll get better. Coming up, we've got the balustrade tax thing is really coming. It really, really is. If not next, after that, like it's coming.
Are we coming up to the point in the balustrade tax thing where he actually ends up in jail, or is that still quite?
That's still going to get kicked down the road, because
I think that's 67, right?
He appeals the hell out of things.
Right.
He gets convicted in 67.
Okay.
But he doesn't actually go to jail, I think, until 71.
Holy crap, he really did.
He appeals the hell out of it.
He did a good job.
Yeah. But yeah, we're going to cover the 66, 67 stuff because there's some really juicy stuff that comes up in that trial. So that'll be coming up maybe next time. I'm kind of making sure that I'm not skipping something that we're going to need to know. I got another story of two guys named Rasmussen and Wick, who I think they're cool guys, but I can't tell their story until I tell the Bell Street tax story, because the Bell Street tax story ends up affecting a lot of other stories.
Interesting.
Because of the, I was going to say crap, but it's not crap. I mean, it's legitimate defense stuff. Because of the stuff they do at trial, it affects the way a lot of other guys act at trial.
Can you give me, what do you mean by that? Like, I mean, I guess they're just by trying to protect themselves, or what do you mean?
Well, I'll save most of it till we get to it. So maybe next time, but basically the Bell Street defense is a very strong offense. Okay. In that he is going to just go after the government hard.
Okay.
And if he's going to go down, he's taking everybody with him. Like he's going to make sure everybody who investigated him looks bad on the way.
Oh, okay. So is he basically just digging dirt up on everybody involved?
Sort of. Yeah.
Okay. I guess we'll just have to see when this story comes. Hopefully it's next time. So
we can do it next time. let's just get it out of the way. I don't think there shouldn't be anything else that I have to do ahead to make it make sense. So we can do it next time.
And that opens you up. So now that story's out there, so you don't have to look at a story and be like, well, we shouldn't really tell that until after we do the Bell Street.
All right. Thing. Let's just go ahead and say it. Let's do the Bell Street tax trial next time.
All right. Look at that. See how this works? How I wear them down for you guys so you get what you want?
Yeah, that's what people actually want anyway. So let's just, I assume. Again, nobody tells me, but I assume that's what people actually want.
All right. So then if we don't got anything else, we can wrap this episode up. Gavin, where can people reach out to you at?
Yeah, they can email MilwaukeeMafia@gmail.com. I check it. It's get some good stuff in there sometimes. So definitely would like to see more questions to use on the Patreon, but any questions at all or comments you have, send my way.
And we do also have a Patreon, like Gavin alluded to. You can find that at patreon.com/Milwaukee Mafia or just on MilwaukeeMafia.com. You'll see links everywhere for it. But do get into that. That does give you access to 2 extra episodes a month, which I don't think we have said in a very long time on this podcast.
Yes, but the Patreon gives you 2 extra episodes a month at the low price of $2.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good deal.
It's a great deal.
Yeah. And we don't do things that, we don't put part of the timeline in there. You're not missing anything if you don't have the Patreon. But we get into a lot more of the behind the scenes type stuff and side stories that don't really fit in. And Eric says those are the most fun episodes he does.
Yeah, they are easily the funnest for me because I get to ask lots and lots more questions and stuff like that. And like we just did launch the new segment where we're doing stories about Al Capone.
Yeah.
And where he's actually been in Wisconsin, which I think is something that everybody probably, I mean, maybe people aren't as annoyed as me and you are by all the stories of Al Capone being everywhere. But
I think most people like that. But
maybe they do, but I think it's extremely annoying.
Yeah.
But I'm just jaded by Gavin.
It gets old, but people seem to like it. I mean, people are still using it as a marketing tool, so people must like it, I guess. I don't know.
Or they think people like it.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
So, but all right, with that, we'll wrap this episode up. We'll be back next week with a Patreon and 2 weeks with a regular Mafia episode. We want to thank everybody for their continued support of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. Join us next time for another look back at Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.